Turning the page, Prime Minister Mark Carney has invited India's Prime Minister to attend the G7 summit in Alberta later this month, and Narendra Modi has accepted. This despite years of spiraling bilateral relations between our two countries, marked by accusations of murder, of foreign interference, expelled diplomats, and indefinitely paused negotiations on a free trade deal. Mark Carney was pressed Friday on his decision to extend Modi an invite.
Do you believe Mr. Modi was involved in the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar?
Well, first off, there is a legal process that is literally underway and quite advanced in Canada, and it's never appropriate to make comments in any respect with respect to those legal processes.
But with respect, if you cannot say no, why invite him here?
I gave, with respect, I gave you an answer that is appropriate to someone in my position about an ongoing legal process including which federal authorities are directly involved.
With me now to talk more about this are the Globe and Mail's Ottawa Bureau Chief, Bob Fife, and Senior Parliamentary reporter, Stephen Chase. Hi to both of you. As soon as this story broke, I thought of both of you because on everything China and everything India, it's been the two of you really churning out these stories. Bob, I've got to start with you. Were you surprised to hear? I know that you guys had done a story about the new Foreign Affairs Minister looking to reset the relationship, but were you surprised to hear it go so far as Prime Minister Modi getting an invite to our country?
Well, there had been rumors the last couple of weeks that Prime Minister Modi might get an invite to the G7, so it didn't come as a big surprise. It's a much bigger surprise, of course, to the Canadian Sikh community, which are many members of the Canadian Sikh community who will feel quite offended that Modi has been invited. But, you know, I think we've got to recognize that Mr. Carney is trying to practice the real politics. We have a real serious issue with the United States. And the Prime Minister is trying to reach out to large economies in the world to see if we can get trade with Canadian trade to get into these markets. So he's reached out to the Chinese, and now he's reached out to India, which is the fastest growing economy in the world. It's fifth largest, but growing very, very rapidly. And, you know, it's an effort on his behalf to say, you know, we've had real serious issues with China kidnapping Canadian citizens, and we've had a real issue, obviously a much more serious one in some ways, the Indian government or Indian agents killing Canadians on Canadian soil, which is a very serious issue. But I think he's realizing that from the Canadian perspective, Canada has to reach out to these countries for economic reasons. And let's remember, the Modi government was accused of also trying to kill a Sikh in the United States and other extortion activities in the United States. The United States was very strongly criticized them, but did not cut off relations for geopolitical reasons.
Yeah, I guess the sort of one salient difference there is that that individual wasn't actually murdered on U.S. soil. In the case of the Canadian allegation, Steve, it's that that the Modi government is tied to, and this is the allegation that came from the former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau himself, that the government is tied to the murder of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil. Bob makes Bob makes a great point that obviously against the backdrop of the U.S. threat, the economic incentive for China and India, two massive economies, is very clear. But how complicated is this?
I think it's really complicated. He has, first of all, he wasn't here for the last 6 years, 7 years during this erosion of relations, both with India and China. I think in particular, the Chinese one may be more difficult for him. Right now we have a trade war with China where we have slapped steep tariffs on their electric vehicles and their steel and aluminum. And in return, they've hit our pork, our agricultural products like canola oil, and our seafood. The only way through that is to remove tariffs on electric vehicles and steel and aluminum, and the Americans are likely to be outraged about that. So I'm very curious how Mr. Carney is going to thread the needle with the Chinese. He had a call last night with his counterpart in China, talked about solving these things, getting beyond them, but the only way to do that is likely going to irritate the United States, which is asking for its allies to join them in confronting China.
Bob, what's your impression behind the scenes in your conversations with people in the Carney government about how they intend to navigate these pretty serious issues on, for example, human rights, or even on the complicating factors that Steve lays out when it comes to tariffs and counter tariffs. And the overall big picture, which, as you point out, seems to be, if we've got to get away from the U.S., there are other economies we should look at.
Yeah, look, I think the China card, which Steve has pointed out, is probably a really difficult one for the government to handle, because we're now in the process of very complicated and intense negotiations with the Trump administration, one in which the Prime Minister and the President are actually talking directly about these issues. And all the Americans we've talked to, including senior people in the Senate, have said that anything that happens with the Americans want some kind of a deal in terms of how we're going to deal with China. And that is a very complicated figure for the government to deal with. But I also think what we're seeing in the Carney government, we've already know that he's moved the Liberal Party back to the center. And I think we're going to see him moving much in the direction of Jean Chrétien's government, where he really reached out and tried to develop a very strong economic relationship with the Chinese and other countries around the world. So this is, in a way, we've seen this playbook before with the Chrétien government and with the Mulroney government. This is sort of a return to what we've seen in the past. But whether he's going to be successful in achieving this, given the bipartisan consensus in the United States that China is a threat to the world, and the Western worlds have to work together and cooperate on this. And that is something we're going to have to watch very intently to see how it works out.
Yeah, I think that the difference, as Bob points out, between, let's say, the Chrétien government and what's happening right now is sort of a worldview that has emerged that paints China, has characterized it as an adversary, given, and I mean, we don't have to look far in the Canadian context for evidence of why that would be the case. How do you anticipate they end up navigating that? And I also would point out Prime Minister Trudeau, there was a time when he was going to reestablish a stronger economic relationship with China, and that fell apart for good reason.
I'm not sure how far he's going to go. I think the real problem is he's getting pressure from the premiers. Mr. Carney's getting pressure from the premiers because our farmers, our seafood producers, our pork producers are getting hammered. He has to decide if we're going to build this relationship beyond agriculture and increasingly energy. China's buying more and more of our oil exports, whether they're going to broaden it beyond that. When he was asked during the campaign about whether China would be a substitute for the United States, he made it clear he didn't think they were. He made it clear that we would rather be trading more with like-minded partners. So I'm not so sure whether Mr. Carney wants a full-blown Jean Chrétien love romance with the Chinese government, or just to sort of try to clear up what are obviously intractable problems.
Yeah, if I recall, even in the debate, I think he has said, when somebody asked about a national security threat, he picked China as one of the biggest ones. So
India, however, is another kettle of fish. And of course, we have a diaspora in Canada. Many Sikhs who are very wary of the Indian government, and they represent probably half the population of Indo-Canadians here. They're going to make their voices known. They have a lot of good points, and they're obviously outraged today. You may have seen the response from the World Sikh Organization.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I have to leave it on that note. I'm out of time. Thank you both so much for your time and your insights on this story. I appreciate it. Bob Fife and Steve Chase with the Globe.